Remember that time when Universal wanted to create their own dark universe with a bunch of monster movies? That worked out well, right? Problem is, one movie already did that and didn't need Tom Cruise. And truth be told, it's a much better movie too. So our job this week is going to be nice and easy when we tell you that the Monster Squad is not that bad. Welcome one and all to It's Not That Bad, the podcast that looks for A grades in B movies. And I am stoked because we have a fun one this week. A movie that initially I thought I hadn't seen, but then I'm watching, I'm like, this seems really familiar. It's one of those movies where I guess I have actually seen it. I just forgot that I had seen it. That just tells you how many movies I've seen. But that's okay. That's okay. Because we're talking about the Monster Squad. And here we're turning to the podcast is Peter from the Movie Duel Podcast. Pete, how you doing, man?
I'm doing really well. Thank you, Jason.
So when it came time to get you back on the show and you pitched this movie, what is it about this film?
Well, this is just prime, my childhood was just, aching to watch this film, really. It was incredibly up my street. It was, classic movie monsters, kids. It just brings back so many memories of watching this when I was, I must have been around 8, 9, 10 sort of years old. And it just takes me back completely. And it's still as good now as it was then.
And that's the thing. It kind of fits into almost that genre of kid adventure films that we're going to get into a little bit later on. But it fits in the pocket quite well. And if you haven't seen this movie, you should definitely go and watch it before you listen to the rest of this podcast, because otherwise we're just going to ruin it for you. So just be warned that there's going to be spoilers coming out. And part of those spoilers is that we're going to take this film, The Monster Squad, and trailerize it.
When a group of legendary monsters come to town, there's only one thing to do: play the Monster Mash. But these ghouls looking for a graveyard smash didn't come to party. They're here to destroy the world, and it's up to a bunch of teenagers to save the day. We are so screwed. Enter the Monster Squad, a ragtag bunch of Goonies looking to deal with the stranger things happening in their town in this film that's not shot on Super 8. They're going to kick these baddies right in the wolf dork. Also, when was the last time you heard someone say dork this much? I feel old just reading the script. The Monster Squad, rated PG-13 for punt to the gonads.
Brilliant.
It was one of those things where I'm watching this and those are the moments that as they come up on the movie, I'm like, no, wait, I have seen this film. The term wolf dork kind of brings it back a little bit here. But let's get into who is in this film. The movie stars Andre Gower, Robbie Kiger, Stephen Macht, Duncan Regier, Tom Noonan, Brent Chalem, Ryan Lambert, Ashley Bank, Michael Faustino, Jonathan Grise, and again, I apologize if I mess up any of these names, Mary Ellen Trainor, Leonardo Cimino, and Jason Hervey. However, there is an almost starring in this one because Liam Neeson was apparently paid for a bit part that was never shot, and I'm just wondering how I get that job.
Well, yeah. Wow. Okay. I've never ever picked that up, and I've seen read a lot of trivia and seen quite a few behind the scenes and documentaries about this film, and I've never heard that.
I just wonder if they heard that he was going to do Dracula Dead and loving it and then paid him to go away. I'm just curious. Just curious here. Apparently also Dustin Diamond, who of course played Screech on Saved by the Bell, had a small role in this, but his scenes were apparently cut. And Seth Green apparently did a screen test for the role of Sean that Andre Gower got. Yes. But obviously we got Andre Gower. I could see Seth Green in this movie too. It would have made sense.
Absolutely. I mean, it's only a few years removed from obviously his turn in the TV series of It, which is a very sort of similar concept, I suppose. And yeah, you could definitely see him in this role.
Right. The film is directed by Fred Dekker, who, of course, directed Night of the Creeps and RoboCop 3. And it was written by Dekker and Shane Black, the writer-director of Iron Man 3 and The Predator. So somehow we have an MCU tie to the Monster Squad, and I'm kind of here for it. And here's a name that we're going to remember. It was exec produced by Peter Hyams, who was the director of The Relic. And when we were talking about this movie, you're like, there's two connections to The Relic. Peter Hyams is one. Please let our listeners know what the second one is.
Well, the second one is Robert Lesser, who plays the father of Eugene, who's the sort of youngest member of the Monster Squad, who quite sort of comically in the film tries to convince him there's not a monster in his wardrobe. Who played the mayor in The Relic, the cleavage obsessed mayor.
I love how you have to put the cleavage obsessed mayor, and then you also have to question, well, how many mayors are cleavage obsessed out there? And I'm sure the number is, as I say, probably fairly high. Surprisingly and happily, this film did not get any nominations at either the Razzies or the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards. However, at the Saturn Awards, it actually did pretty good. It was nominated for Best Costumes, lost to The Princess Bride. It was nominated for Best Music, lost to Predator. Andrew Goyer was nominated for Best Performance by a Younger Actor. He lost to Kirk Cameron in Like Father, Like Son. And Duncan Regeer was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He lost to Richard Dawson in The Running Man. And I mean, Andre Gower losing to Kirk Cameron. Okay, Kirk Cameron was kind of a big deal at the time. And Richard Dawson was just a ton of fun in The Running Man. I'm not going to lie. Like, you kind of have to hand it to him on that one. And I think the lack of screen time for Duncan Regeer in this probably didn't help his case.
Quite possibly, but I think that sort of helps with any sort of horror movie. I think if they'd have thrown in too much more of the Dracula character in this film, it would have taken away from it. I think it just gets the amount of screen time for Dracula right, and I think if we had any more, it would have veered away into a bit more. I think they'd have been tempted to do a bit more comedy, and that would have ruined the film.
Yeah, and the thing is, anytime you play a Dracula-esque character, there's going to be probably that inclination to fall into a bad Transylvanian accent, and all of a sudden go full count. But he didn't, and it's good.
No.
Also, at the 1988 Young Artist Awards, the film won for Best Young Actors Ensemble in a TV show or motion picture, and I wholeheartedly agree with that one. And
absolutely.
Surprising that they did all this on just a $12 million budget. However, worldwide, it only made $3.7 million. When it was released on the August 14th, 1987 weekend, it debuted at number 12 with only $1.9 million. The highest grossing debut that weekend was Can't Buy Me Love. It brought in $4.75 million. No Way Out debuted at number 4 with $4.2 million. And Disorderlies debuted at number 7 at $2.7 million. The number one film that week was the second week of Stakeout, which came in with $5.5 million. But you take a look at the box office that weekend. You got La Bamba in there. Okay, no problem. You have the second week of Masters of the Universe. You've got the Lost Boys still in there, and that kind of falls into that genre, if you will. You got Summer School, you've got Back to the Beach, which you also have Summer School and Back to the Beach. So that tells you, the time of year. And also keep in mind, too, you're releasing a monster film in the middle of August. It seems like a bad time of year to be putting out this kind of film.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you think sort of summer blockbusters, things like Jaws, obviously that led the led the way in that, and that's, it's almost of that ilk of sort of big scary sort of films that are not, are sort of centered towards a slightly younger audience. So it's not massively beyond the realms of doing well. I think there's a lot of conjecture as to why it was maybe not so successful. Marketing being one of them. It was maybe not marketed the best. The studio didn't quite put the full force behind the marketing for the film, and and there was, I think maybe they didn't necessarily know who to market it to as well, because it's quite a strong. Some of the horror scenes in the film are quite strong. And I mean, it's over here. It was released as a 15, which I think is the sort of equivalent of an R rating, I think, across the pond.
Well, when you take a look at it, and we recently did an episode on Jason X, and that film in the UK was released with a 15. So you're taking a look at the Monster Squad, and you're taking a look at Jason X, and even though Jason X is one of the more tame Friday the 13th episodes, you have a movie coming out that's supposedly geared towards kids, yet has the same kind of rating as, Jason in Space. Like it's,
exactly.
And there is a lot to this film where, if you have parents who are maybe leery of bringing their kids to a film that has a bit of language. There's a bit of language in this. It's not straight PG kind of movie. No. It is PG-13. So there's a lot to unpack out of this rating here.
Yeah.
But the one rating that does matter for us is the critic score. Over at Metacritic, this film has a Metascore of 61. And over at Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score is 77%. The tomatometer is 56%. Now, before you sit there and say, okay, you're doing a film with a 56% critic score, you're kind of playing on easy mode today. Let me put this into perspective here. Taking a look at some of the films that came out around that time that may kind of fit in that same boat. The Goonies has a tomatometer of 77% and an audience score of 91%. Stand By Me has a tomatometer of 92% and an audience score of 94%. And Lost Boys has a tomatometer of 77% with an audience score of 85. So on both of those meters, the Monster Squad, which I personally enjoyed, more so than some of these films, fared worse. And all of a sudden the tomato is green so the movie can be seen. So when you take a look at those comparables, before we get into the breakdown here, is this film, even a 56% critic score and a 77% audience score, is it unfairly maligned?
Absolutely. And I think that comes down to, you can put the Goonies out there, you can put Stand By Me out there, and most people will know of those films, or they will know those films. But if you talk to them about the Monster Squad, most, generally people are probably going to say, "I never heard of it. What the hell's that?" And I think that's massively unfair, because this is, although the Goonies, Stand By Me are probably better made films and better in that sense, the Monster Squad's just so much more enjoyable. It's just a fantastic, fun ride that just hits all of your senses.
I think I can agree with you when it comes to the Goonies. And this is going to be, I think, the comparable that we talk about a lot in this episode. When you take a look at the Goonies, the cast is, you could say, on equal footing, especially in the case of Mary Ellen Trainor, because she's in both. But you take a look at some of the set pieces for the Goonies, and you are talking a much higher budget and a much bigger production and some bigger names behind it. So there's some money there. They did all this on a $12 million budget. That's, it's still a good chunk of change, especially in the 80s, but it's not Goonies money. And yet I still think from a character perspective, for the most part, you had equal to or better to work with in some cases. And again, we're going to draw a bunch of comparables to the Goonies, I'm sure, during this episode. But if you like the Goonies, you're going to like the Monster Squad if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, I mean, this film is an hour and 21 minutes long. This crams in so much, and it does it without it feeling rushed. I mean, the Goonies, from memory, off the top of my head, I think is getting close to 2 hours long. Stand By Me, probably the same as well. And this just has it all. It has everything that the Goonies has, and it does it in that time. And it doesn't look that much cheaper than, or that much cheaply made than the Goonies.
Well, except for the toilet flushing black hole that gets popped into existence, but we'll get we'll get to that one in a bit. But let's get to the breakdown here. Andre Gower, who plays Sean, the leader of the Monster Squad, how was he as the leader for you?
I think really good. I think it's a shame, that he didn't really do a great deal. Certainly not that I've seen after this, but he's definitely the most believable of the young actors, and he is the lead of this film, and he handles it so well. Again, comparing to the Goonies, he handles it as well as Sean Astin does. He's got quite a charming character. He's very much able to portray a leader of these kids. He's just really strong, and I think you see a lot of the actors sort of come through when you see a lot of interviews with Andre Gower. It comes across in his performance just how capable and strong of a personality he is.
I think the good thing for Andre Gower in this is that Sean isn't as burdened down with the weight of everything that Sean Astin's character in the Goonies is dealing with. Yes, his parents are going through, for lack of a better term, marital strife. Of course,
just straight out of the Steven Spielberg playbook.
Very much so. Like let's throw a little trauma in there somewhere. Let's throw out some weight on the back of the character, but it doesn't define. It feels in the Goonies that Sean Astin is having to drag the rest of the team to the end, to be able to complete the mission, if you will. Whereas Sean in this doesn't have to do that. The team is there, the team is working together. They have a plan, maybe a bad plan, but it's a plan nevertheless. And it's never, he's never bringing us down with everything that he's dealing with at home. And I think there was a lot of, these characters in the Goonies were dealing with a lot, foreclosure of houses, moving away, everything seemed down in their life. Here, you have Sean. Yeah, his parents are going through some things, but it's not like they're taking it on him. And it's not like he's yelling at the parents to get their ish together. It's a good performance without the emotional baggage thrown onto the character.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Robbie Kiger, who plays Patrick. I'm going to tie two characters here because Michael Faustino, who plays Eugene as well. And I'm not going to lie. These two characters, Patrick and Eugene, kind of felt a little extraneous.
Yes. Yeah. I think they're there just to provide moments. And I mean, definitely Eugene does, because he's this sort of very quiet, sort of shy character who's just sort of there to hit a couple of beats with, just sort of for comedic effect, really. And the Patrick character is as well, really. I suppose he's there to sort of tie in the mini sort of subplot with his sister and people taking rather creepy photos of her from a treehouse.
Yeah, it's a little weird that the camera in the treehouse that he goes to, and he has to know where it's pointing. Mm-hmm. And he's the one that has to ask his sister, if she's a virgin.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is a Pornhub category waiting to happen, I think. But it's just one of those things where...
Yeah. Well, he's jumping... when they've got the photo as well, and Frankenstein's monster's got hold of the photo and they're all jumping to reach it, he's one of the ones jumping for it as well.
Please tell me he's trying to take the picture so no one has to look at it. Please.
Well, you'd like to hope so.
It's just one of those things where like those two characters felt extraneous, almost like they needed extra bodies in order to be able to do the mission, but they weren't really flushed out. And that's one knock I'm going to give on this film, is that you have characters that could have added more if you had the space. Give them an extra 10 minutes to the film, and I think you can flush them out a little bit more.
Yeah, well, I don't think the runtime's pretty perfect for me. I don't think it harms the film in any way. I think you could have had that, and I don't think it would have knocked it anywhere. But I think it was it definitely doesn't miss it.
Okay, so let's then talk about Brent Shalem, who played Horace, the much better version of Chunk. If we're still doing comparisons to the Goonies here, how was Brent Shalem for you?
Again, really, he's there mainly for comic effect, but I think he's got such a great arc in the film. Obviously, by the end of the film, at the start of the film, he's obviously being bullied. There's a very icky use of the other F word in this film, which is in 2023 is incredibly out of place. But he's browbeaten throughout the film. His nickname is Fat Kid. Even his friends call him Fat Kid. But as the film goes through, he's got the immortal line in this film as well, which is Wolfman's got nards. Which is just fantastic. It's obviously a saying from your sort of neck of the woods. It's not nards is not something that I'm familiar with, but you know exactly what he means. And then by the end of the film, he becomes one of the heroes, and ploughing down the Gillman, as he's called in this film, in a hail of shotgun shells. And announcing that his name is Horace.
Yeah, he does have that triumphant moment, and like I'll be honest, when I'm watching the Goonies, like if Chunk's on, I'm reaching for the mute button. Like it's after a while, his voice started to annoy me. Here, Horace is good, right? He has a complete arc. He has redemption. He has, he gets to basically be the man, in front of the bully while the bully is cowering, in the store. Like it's great for those moments, but I'm glad you brought up some of the language usage in this film. Mm-hmm. Look, I'm not going to sit here and cancel the Monster Squad because, they use some words that, in 2023 are not exactly LGBTQ plus friendly. Mm-hmm. We recognize that the film is of its time, and that time was way less sensitive to everyone. Just go back and watch a Police Academy film, and you'll see what I mean, right? But I think it's one of those things where if you put yourself in the mindset that this is a film from the 80s, and this is how, unfortunately, a lot of characters in media properties talked, like fictional characters, right? It's of its time. So, I don't agree with, if this movie was remade today with the same script, no. But back in the 80s, that's just what it was, for exactly how wrong that it was in hindsight. But it's not worth canceling the film. Just remember it was the 80s. Yeah.
Oh god, yeah. I don't think it's, I think there's a couple of things that you can throw at this film. I think there's a case of quote unquote slut shaming in this film as well, which with Patrick's sister, that you can sort of throw at it. And I know the filmmakers have sort of brought that up in recent years, but I don't like you say, it's just of its time. It's just of its time, and you've got to see it. You've got to watch any film like that, like this. With that in mind, it's just not. There's no point in this film that you think that it's overly. What's the word? Overly egregious about those sorts of things. It's not being setting out to be completely nasty about it.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing too is, if you want to put it into perspective, these are high school kids, and high school kids are going to use that language on the playground, right? Like that's it's going to happen. I'm sure everyone in the history of ever, if they went back and listened to how they actually talked back in their high school days, they'd be sitting there going, so glad there weren't cameras back then. But regardless of, I don't think it pulls away from the fun of the film.
No.
Ryan Lambert, who played Rudy, the older, cooler kid, because he was cool because he had sunglasses and a leather jacket. How was he?
Yeah, great. Well, it's very archetypal, sort of this. He is and he isn't. I think he's very archetypal in his look. He looks, like you say, the sunglasses, the leather jacket. He's not quite got the motorcycle. He's got the sort of chopper. But he's, he looks like the archetypal sort of bad boy of the 80s. But I don't think they push it too far. I don't think he's too, he almost, although he's got a lot more confidence than maybe the rest of the Monster Squad, he still comes across as a little bit lame in some ways. He's still a little bit of a geek. He knows he answers near enough all the questions he's got to answer to get into the club, so he knows about this stuff. And he's basically just a massively horny teenager who's got a reputation. But he's got some of the best moments in the film as well.
I think the thing I like about him is that, yes, it's kind of a trope. Got the leather jacket, got the sunglasses, probably smokes more than likely, and comes through in a pinch. But he's not an asshole to the Monster Squad. He's one of them. He's one of them that just got a little bit older, right?
Yeah.
And you do see some of these, reunion of younger fun kid groups kind of thing, where they get back together and someone who was a complete dork back in the day all of a sudden got cool, but he's still one of them at heart. This feels like Rudy, right? Rudy knows where he came from. Rudy knows these kids and knows that they like the same things he does. So, he stands up for Horace. He stands up against the bullies, even though when you look at Rudy, it's kind of punching down at that point. But it's still using the cool to right the wrong. And that, I think, is different than a lot of the films that were out there at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's he's not just, he's not just, he's not just an arse. He's not an arsehole. He's not an arsehole at all. And it's a massive plus point for this film. And he gets some of the better lines in this film as well.
Ashley Bank, who played young Phoebe. This was actually her first film, but she had TV appearances on like Family Ties and Cagney and Lacey prior to this. I'm so happy that I don't have to sit here and, remind people that we try not to pick on kids' performances, because I actually think Ashley Bank was phenomenal in this. Phoebe was so much fun and you said Rudy had some of the best lines. I think Phoebe had some of the best lines in this.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, everything would point to this being a really annoying performance, and it should, by absolute rights, be a very, really annoying performance. But it's not. It's just right. It's right on the button. You believe the relationship that she has with Tom Noonan's Frankenstein's monster. I'm falling into the trope there. But you absolutely believe it. And she's the, one of the saviors in the end. She does her part at the very end of the film. and was genuinely terrified by Dracula as well, as I understand.
That was fun because, you know, when we're doing the research here, I'm taking a look at IMDb, and I guess there was a story that she did not like the fangs that Duncan Regehr had to wear as Dracula.
She didn't know. She
Yeah.
didn't know he was going to be wearing them.
So yeah, so when they lift her up to head height with him, and he shows the fangs, that's like the genuine reaction, like, oh crap, right? You know, so A, scare the crap out of a kid for a performance, but B, great reaction from the kid in the performance. So, but yeah, I think Ashley Bank did a phenomenal job as Phoebe, and the part was well written for her. And I liked the dynamic between her and Andre Gower. Like, it was a good sibling dynamic, very realistic.
Absolutely, yeah. It's anybody who's got an older brother or an older sister or a younger brother or a younger sister, they know that relationship, and it's something that's going to be very familiar to most sort of siblings. And yeah, absolutely great performances from both of them.
Yeah, I think, you know, the fact that there's no girls written on the door to the clubhouse, you know, and she still comes in anyways, right? So that's exactly what the younger sister would do.
Well, they can't let her in because it's prescription, as she says.
Oh, man. Again, this is such a fun script. It really is. Stephen Macht, who played Del, Sean's dad, it could have been a trope. He could have been the hard-ass cop dad kind of thing, but no. He's not. Like, at no point is he, you know, taking out his frustrations with his job and his wife on Sean. You know, there's the moment where he comes back home with takeout food, and they're sitting on the roof, and, you know, through binoculars and a radio watching the drive-in film. Like, he was a good family dad. Yeah,
definitely. And I think he's, you know, again, it's believable. You totally believe that performance, and, you know, although you know, it doesn't go over the top with that sort of the melodrama aspects of the script and that relationship between him and his wife. It's there and it's played out, and you know, you see that in his performance, and you know, and he's such a caring father about, you know, although he's not, you know, talking about it directly with his son, you know, he's making sure, you know, he knows it's important to keep a good relationship with his children, despite the fact that he's, you know, having marital problems, and that comes across without it being right in your face.
Yeah, they weren't didactic about it, and the thing is, the story's not about the marital problems. The story's about the kids, right? So they did enough in order to be able to set up the, you know, the family, you know, bond moment kind of thing, but they didn't let it get in the way of the story. Kind of like how it felt like the, you know, the back problems for Sean Astin's character kind of got in the way of the Goonies. Here it was there for resolution and was at the perfect level. Although I will say, it felt like a great underuse of a perfectly good Mary Ellen Trainor.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this isn't, it doesn't feel too far out of her wheelhouse, really. But she's always, you know, in anything that she's in, she's always really solid. She doesn't really have a great deal to do in this film. She provides sort of, you know, a few bits of, you know, pointing things in the right direction and stuff like that with the Van Helsing's diary and stuff like that. So she's, you know, aside from that sort of marital problem subplot, she's sort of pointing the way, really.
There was one actor in this where, as soon as they were on screen, I had that holy crap, it's that guy moment. It's Jason Hervey, who played EJ. And if you ever watched The Wonder Years, yes, that's Fred Savage's brother in the show. You know, not much for him in there except for to be the bully. But I think he did it well enough.
Yeah, absolutely. He's very, again, you know, a little bit like Rudy. He's quite archetypal. You know, he's there to be an antagonist to the Monster Squad at a lower level, and to, you know, bring out the you know, he's there for the he's sort of comeuppance at the end where he's shown up to be the coward that he is against Horace, who's standing up for himself, really.
Leonardo Cimino, who played the quote unquote scary German guy in the house.
Well, that's what he's credited as, I believe. He doesn't have a name.
Oh,
he's
wow.
a scary German guy.
I know we've been mentioning the Goonies a lot in this, but he feels like a character that would have come more out of The Burbs, that movie with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a classic sort of Boo Radley style character, really. He's made out to be this sort of figure of fear in the neighborhood, and he's built up to be a potential antagonist, but within seconds of introducing him, he's warning them about running out of pie, and he becomes this sort of largely sort of comical role throughout the film, but then he also provides quite a poignant moment as well, with the Holocaust connection and talking about real monsters.
And again, drawing character comparisons here. If you think about, the snow shoveling old guy from Home Alone, the one they all thought was a murderer and was shoveling bodies, chopping the bodies up and then shoveling them out on his driveway. It's that kind of character. And it's, again, a bit of an 80s trope, but I think played well enough.
Yeah.
Before we get to the monsters in this here, there's someone we need to punt off the island.
Please tell me. Please tell me you're going to mention Stan Shaw.
I was about to say Stan Shaw, who played Detective Sapper, Dell's partner. How can we ship him off the island in this one?
Oh, it's just for the part that it is. It's just he's got to be quite possibly the most sarcastic person in a film ever. He's just fantastic. And for I think he's 2, maybe 3 scenes in this film, he almost steals every scene that he's in, I think.
It was just annoying. Like,
what? No.
Honestly, like I'm watching this and just especially when they're running to the car to go after the dad gets the call that, I'm going to kill your children kind of thing. And the dude's cracking jokes left and right. Like, Mark Fraser from Samurai Cop did a better job of playing like the detective cop than this guy did, and I don't know. It just got to me, and I don't know why.
I'm going to massively disagree with you, Jason. I'm afraid. I loved it. I thought he was incredibly funny.
I think
maybe that's because I have a very sarcastic sense of humor, so maybe that I'm very akin to his thought processes. Maybe.
I think the biggest problem for me with him is that he felt tonally different from the entirety of everyone else in the film, right? This movie is not played for gags and jokes, right? It, again, very much like the Goonies, they're on what's to them a serious mission. And while there's bickering and dork talk and Wolfman's got nads and whatnot, like there's those moments, but they don't feel like quippy moments. Whereas Detective Sapper is constantly making jokes and it feels almost shoehorned into the script because someone's got to be funny in the damn thing.
But then I think it also adds that sense of sort of realism to the film, because if you were a detective in a police force, and there was talk of mummies going missing and werewolves, there's going to be certain people that react that way to those kind of things, and he. His perception does change once he realizes, there's obviously the sort of chase down back to the main sort of household, and his perception does change that a little bit, but he's reacting to a very unreal circumstance in a very sarcastic way.
I think the part that got me, and again, it's this moment where they're racing to the car, and after he got the phone call from the Wolfman before he changed, kind of thing, you have to assume that at some point Del has said, like, they threatened my family to his partner, which would justify why they're going to race to wherever they have to go to, right? At that point, the partner should not be cracking like maniacal laughter, sarcasm at that point. That's the part that felt. Before, I could agree with you. It's that one scene that kind of stands out.
Okay. I always thought that came a bit earlier in the film where he's laughing, but I could be wrong.
Oh, trust me. The thing is, he was justifiably laughing and being sarcastic beforehand. Maybe it's just that one scene that really, it felt almost unnecessary. Because, like, if your partner's that panicked, you might want to not, just not. Okay. Again, maybe just me. Jonathan Gries, who was the human form of the Wolf Man. Again, I really liked him in this.
Yeah, I think he plays, I think I can think of a good sort of handful of performances of his where he plays somebody who's a little bit sort of out there and maybe, not got all his, he's not playing with a full deck kind of character, or a bit desperate, or a bit, on the, what's the word? Not playing with the full deck really. He's really, he plays this desperate man as he's credited in this film, really well. Again, very believable. You believe that he's wanting to escape this sort of curse that befouls him, and yeah, it's a really decent performance from him.
On the flip side, you've got Tom Noonan as Frankenstein's monster. Yes, remember, Frankenstein is not the monster. Frankenstein's the doctor. Yeah. How was he for you? I have thoughts, but how was he?
I think he's pretty good. I think Tom Noonan's got such a unique look to him anyway, without even being, dressed up as Frankenstein's monster. You could have done a little bit less makeup on him, and I think he would still have looked quite unique. But I think he pulls off the sympathetic sort of performance. I think it is maybe a little bit too much like Sloth from The Goonies. We're going to go there again. But there's certain parts in the performance that work really well. The relationship with the Phoebe character is quite sweet. Then, at the end, when he's got this very sort of cathartic look on his face before he gets sucked into the Van Helsing void, that works really well. But I think it was maybe just ever so slightly played for laughs too much.
I'm glad you pointed out the Sloth thing, because, again, you're going to get those comparables. And yes, Sloth loved Chunk and Frankenstein's monster loved Phoebe. But there are parts where, yes, I completely agree. Tom Noonan was a great monster as far as look goes, as far as mannerisms go. And there was the scene where he's looking at the Frankenstein's monster mask. I did it myself. And he just looks at everyone else and goes, scary. And I'm just like, okay, I get it now. It's good. There were times when it felt a little much, but for the most part, Tom Noonan, I think, did a pretty good job. But then we get to Duncan Regeer, who played Dracula. And man, did this guy eat up the scenery.
Wow. I mean, despite the fact that he's got probably one of the hokiest Dracula costumes, it's very much very stereotypical Dracula sort of cape and just the general look of him. But he pulls off being sinister so well, and he's There's parts of the script, there's parts of the sort of hammy situations within the film, and even some sort of Arnie style one-liners as well. But he pulls it off so well. He's not pushing the limits too much. It keeps it within this reasonably family-friendly horror, but it doesn't go too far in being too scary, but it also doesn't. The performance doesn't veer too much into being, a parody at all.
Mm-hmm. Like it's definitely Dracula. There's no question about that. And I know there was a whole big thing with Universal that they couldn't necessarily use all the exact monster names. So they couldn't say it was the creature from the Black Lagoon. It was just a dude who happened to have a few gills and came out of the water. But I think the best thing with Duncan Regehr in this is that most of his darker vampiric scenes were mostly done with a lot of smart camera cinematography. Like there's the scene where he goes to turn the three girls that are, stuck in the closet, and it's just their reaction, and we don't go to see like the really bad blood sucking kind of thing. Like it's all done in inference, and you do the picture you're making yourself at that point, and I think that's smart. And the other thing too with Duncan Regehr, and we've made this comparison on this show before with previous movies like the Stallone Judge Dredd film, in that when it comes to the villains, you have stage villains like Armando Sante in Judge Dredd that are very very loud and very verbose, and you don't need the speakers in the cinema. He's projecting everything to the back row himself, where you also have a screen villain as opposed to a stage villain, where things are subtle and they're played for the camera, knowing that the camera is going to convey the emotion without having to be over the top. And I think Duncan Regehr nailed a screen version of Dracula. Like it's not over the top, like you said. It's not tropey. It's all done in subtleness and allowing the viewer to paint the picture themselves. And I think that was a smart call.
Yeah, I mean it's paying homage to Draculas of past, but not so much in your face as well. It's doing it. He's very much putting his own spin on the different sort of iterations of Dracula throughout the years as well. And I mean, at the end of the day, he's got his own car as well.
Oh, that car.
Which is just fantastic.
That car is great. I mean, you could have taken most of the scenes with Duncan Regehr in them and dropped the chroma entirely and put it in black and white, and it would have felt like one of those classic vampire Dracula films from like the 40s and 50s.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the things I think that hurts this film, at least as far as the critic score goes, not in the actual enjoyment of the film, because the film is freaking enjoyable, but when it comes to the critics, is that it has a bit of that been there, done that kind of feel to it, right? Yes, Goonies did it, and Goonies was big doing it, and it's not like one of those movies that, or at least one of those things where you have movies that came out around the same time, like, or even in the same year. This isn't an Armageddon Deep Impact moment. This isn't a Volcano Dante's Peak moment. Like Goonies has been out there, then this comes out, and did it hurt in your opinion, at least from from the reception from the box office and reception from the critics, that Goonies was already there and did this dance?
Possibly, but I always remember, I'm pretty sure I saw this film before I saw the Goonies. And I think it's just, to me, it's a very important film in my horror background, because I'm a big horror fan, really big horror fan. Started from a very young age, but you pick up the... you pick up from various different things, whether it's cartoons or just, just being in the zeitgeist, Dracula, werewolves, Frankenstein's monster, Creature from Black Lagoon, Mummies, things like that. You pick them up just from the general sort of zeitgeist, or from things like Scooby-Doo, Ghostbusters, I'm thinking sort of the cartoons and things like that. So you pick them up. But, for me at that age, you've never necessarily seen them on film. And I think this is a very important film. Anybody who sort of might sort of question about what's a good introduction to horror for somebody of a maybe sort of, early teens. And this sort of stands out as a really good introduction to classic horror, which, Goonies is a classic adventure, or an introduction to classic adventure, whereas this is an introduction to classic horror. And it might use those tropes that, that the Goonies sort of treaded before, but I don't think that this, I don't think it really hurts this film that the Goonies was released before it, because it has its own charm, and it has its own purpose, and you can. Yeah, it has its own purpose for definite.
It almost feels like a gateway film, right? Like this is your first taste, right? Are you interested in science fiction? Well, maybe you should try this film. If you're interested in space opera, go watch a Star Wars film. It's a gateway drug into everything else, right? You want young kids on adventures? Goonies is your gateway. One of the other things too is that more often than not, when we watch some of these older films, you sit there and go, "Oh, that'd be a great thing to do a remake now and do that." But I'm going to sit there and for once say, I don't want this film remade into any other format. I want this film to stand out on its own, and not because I think if you did it now and took that film and redid it for whether it be the theaters or streaming services or whatever, you're unfortunately going to fall into the same trap where this probably got a lot of that, oh, hey, Goonies with monsters, right? Mm-hmm. Here, it's going to be like, oh, hey, watered down Stranger Things. And I don't think there's space at this point for the Monster Squad to be remade or redone, because you still have properties out there that are doing it. And I think that also would take away from the earnestness of this, because if you did it now, the push would be, well, let's make Dracula like really bloodthirsty, and let's make the Frankenstein's monster really like look scary and all that. And I think there's like, I would be so happy if my kids watched this film. Right? It's fine for kids. It's okay to let this film stand on its own.
Well, it's almost like a history lesson. It's a history in horror. It goes through it tells you about the vast majority of the monsters anyway. It tells you about the folklore of them, of vampires, of Frankenstein's monster, werewolves. It goes through those things, and it's very much a homage to the universal era of horror. And I don't think if you made a remake now of something that's 70 years old and probably older, then it wouldn't hit the mark quite so much. I think if you were going to make something of this ilk now, it would need to be based around things like your 80s horror films, your Freddy's, your Jasons, and things like that. I don't know if you could make that film, but that's it needs to go. It would need to pay homage to a different era in horror.
Well, if Universal ever tries to revamp that dark universe, you have to then get to the Monster Squad as your Avengers of that tentpole of that franchise. It has to happen now. Has to happen. All right, Pete, before we go, it is time to name your MVP of the Monster Squad. And at this point, I'm going to sit there and say that the M in MVP has to stand for monster now.
Okay, well, it's got to be Duncan Regehr as Dracula for definite. Absolutely. But I mean, I do like the Wolfman. The Wolfman looks pretty cool, and there's a very sort of dumbed down transformation scene of the Wolfman, and the effects in this film are absolutely fantastic. It's pure Stan Winston. It's got Stan Winston's mark all over it, but just on pure performance, the Dracula performance is just fantastic.
There was a list of great villains in film, and of course the character of Dracula was listed, and I can't remember which publication put this out, but they actually specifically pointed out Duncan Regeer's performance in this as one of the better Draculas to hit the silver screen. And Duncan Regeer was my honorable mention, but it was a toss-up for me, and it wasn't any of the monsters in this. It was a toss-up between Ryan Lambert, who of course played Rudy, and Ashley Bank, who played Phoebe. I think for the tropes that those characters are, and let's be honest, there's so many tropes in films that you could sit there and almost pull out the you're this character deck of cards for some of these films. But I think that Rudy was, the fact that he was a good, cool kid made it work well. And I think that Ashley Bank played Phoebe very well. And I know, it's easy to sit there, see the little kid and go, okay, this is going to be the annoying character. It wasn't. Ashley Bank nailed it. Phoebe's a great character. People, thank you so much for this. Before we go, please let our listeners know where they can find the Movie Duel Podcast.
Well, you can find it at all good places that you find podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere that you'd be able to find. And check us out. We've got some exciting bits coming up, including yourself, Jason. Hopefully coming and doing one of our bonus episodes.
I am so looking forward to it.
But yes, we can. We just released our latest episode on what we called Humble Pie, which was films that we thought that we would hate and ended up loving. And we've got some exciting subjects to come up as well.
Well, make sure you subscribe and follow to wherever you get your podcast, the Movie Duel Podcast. Pete, the door is always open anytime you want to come on back. Just name the movie and we'll go down that road. Now, to you, our listeners, you guys know the drill. If there is a movie out there that you think is unfairly maligned or is just so bad that there's no way in monster hell that we can find anything good to say about it, hit us up on social media at NotThatBadCast or go to our website at NotThatBadCast.com. And while you're there, be sure to check out all of our other shows, including There Can Only Be One, Keep Watch Pass, and our occasional Grading on a Curve episodes. And check out our coming soon page so you can see what movies we're planning on coming down the pipe. Until next time, Pete, thank you. Listeners, you guys are awesome. This is It's Not That Bad. Take care.
Hey folks, Stefan Shirazi and Renee Richardson here from the Metallica Report.
And we are proud members of the Pantheon podcast family, where the best of music and podcasts unite.
We've got something pretty cool for you. We're giving away an exclusive Metallica merch package worth over $250.
That's a whole lot of Scary Guys, Skulls, M72, and other sought-after Metallica swag. And we've made it easy for you to win. Follow and share the Metallica Report, and you're in the game. Go to pantheonpodcast.com/Metallica, enter your email, and hit that button to be entered to win.
And just like that, you're eligible for our monthly exclusive Metallica merch package.
And guess what, rockers? You can enter every month, so just do it. And while we love our global brothers and sisters, the lawyers won't let us ship outside the U.S.